Bro, I'll let you start this conversation anytime you're ready.
I'm ready. Let's go.
Well, bro, why is it important to you that the governor answers the done questions?
Why is it important to me that the governor responds to the questions I've asked him?
Yes.
Right now, our country is in a crisis in education, and it is a manufactured crisis, a crisis in education for political purposes. And Governor DeSantis is not the only one who is using racism and divisiveness as a means to office. And the legislature, and the governor signed a bill that is absolutely unenforceable.
And which bill is that?
The so-called Woke Act.
Okay.
They've gotten a lot of political traction out of it because basically it tends to scare white parents.
Right.
And it's basically a way to obtain political power through the use of race. And for that reason, my sense is that someone like Governor DeSantis is worse than a racist. He's a race user. Someone who uses race, knows better, is not a racist, but uses race as a means to obtain political power. And that's despicable. He's not the only one doing it. And our country is in great peril because of this. So I penned a number of questions to the governor that I thought should be answered given this woke act that he ushered through the legislature, most of which dealt with whether or not institutional racism exists in Florida.
Then let me ask this question first. How does racism hurt the victim and the perpetrator?
Well, it hurts the victims because they could be subject to violence, to death, to dismissal from their jobs, from all kinds of punitive things. The perpetrators are hurt as well because they become inured in racism and almost entitled to act on racist beliefs. So it damages both the victim and the perpetrator.
But we grew up in a time when racism ran rampant. So let's talk a little bit about growing up and racism that you experienced. And let's start with D-Land. Tell us about growing up in D-Land. Tell them about growing
D-Land, Florida is in Volusia County. It's one of the oldest counties in Florida, actually. And it's orange country, citrus country. And our grandparents ended up in DeLand in the early 1900s. And we grew up, I was born in 1940. Really the height of Jim Crow. And it was difficult. Our dad could only have work in the wintertime when the oranges were in. We had to travel as a migrant family during the summer from Florida to New York to pick potatoes, come back in the fall, and resume our lives in Florida. And this was a tough life. Fortunately, our parents insisted that we attended school even when we were on the migrant trail in New York. But we began our lives as a poor family in Volusia County with a dad who could only pick fruit because of his own limited education. Incidentally, as you know, bro, our dad had been in the Navy during the Second World War. He was a cook and complained most of his life about how hurtful that was. That was as much as he could aspire to as a Navy.
And you were defining that as institutional racism at that time.
The Navy was, during that, some people say now as well. The Navy was the most institutionally racist of all the services, mainly because the men, now women, had to be together in close quarters on ships.
Okay.
And a lot of white sailors did not want to be in a berthing area with black people. So as the military was forced as an institution to desegregate, the Navy provided the most resistance to it. And eventually broke because of President Kennedy's insistence that the Navy should do more, particularly to recruit and train black officers.
Okay, so as we work our way up to institutional racism today, let's deal with the foundations of it. So talk a little bit about some of the experiences that we had as youngsters growing up on the migrant trail, trying to get to the different migrant locations.
You know, right, we could not use bathrooms. We couldn't go to cafes or restaurants. Our mother prepared our food before we left Florida. It took 2 days to get to New York. There were no interstates. One of the most difficult parts about it was not being able to have a bathroom to use, not having bathroom facilities. So we would stop, of course, along the side of the road with the five of us, and my
Right.
dad doing that was all right, but mom had to go in the bushes too. I
Okay.
still have some pain from that, Ray.
Okay.
I still remember that particular piece of discrimination that hurt me, and I'm sure hurt mom, although she never complained about it. Um, it was
So we would look at that as a part of Florida's racist past. Is that right? Because we want Governor DeSantis to answer some questions that are relevant today. So this is a part of.
well, in Florida during the time that we were traveling, 1949, 50, 51, yes, Jim Crow was in full bloom. We could not, as I just said, use the facilities
Okay.
as we transitioned from Florida to New York and back. So yes, Florida was an institutionally racist state, actually long before that. But in our personal experience,
Mhm.
we saw and felt these things as little boys growing up in the land in Central Florida.
But things got a little better for you now. Come on now.
Well,
Because-
let's don't jump ahead too fast.
Okay.
I
All
mean,
right.
look. I went to work with mom,
Mhm.
cleaning people's houses in the land,
Right.
and she had to go around the back door
Exactly.
to enter. I was a little boy, just tagging along behind her.
Yeah.
What? How did that make her feel?
Mhm.
Having to be subjected to that. As you may recall, I'm a little older than you. In the land in the 1940s and 50s, just for entertainment, our mom would put us on a bus, a city bus, and we'd ride from Deland to
Right.
Sanford
Yeah.
on a Saturday night and back, maybe even twice,
Mhm.
because Dad be doing what Dad did. But we sat on the back seat of that bus
True.
each time,
Mhm.
and had no thought
Mhm.
of not being on the back of that bus. So there are all kinds of ways that these things get sort of ground into you.
Okay.
You realize.
But I want to force you to admit things did get better.
Oh, yes.
You were able to go off to college, Morehouse College at that. Now,
Harvard of the South, yes.
okay, a part of the South. Now,
No. Harvard of the South.
Harvard
Morehouse
of the
College,
South.
yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. Now let's just see how things got better. I want you to admit when things are better now, because we know that Florida was rooted in racism.
You rushed a little bit too fast to things getting better. As I said in one of those questions to the governor, I was one of the kids in junior high,
Mhm.
one of the black students at our segregated school.
You did ask that question.
Yeah,
of the
who
governor.
was told to go to the white school and get the used textbooks and bring them back to our school.
Exactly.
And I did that, and that
Mhm.
hurt. That hurt. So we had to endure a racially segregated system of education in Florida that hurt both of us. Never mind that we did all right. You have a doctorate too.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
you did all right as well.
Okay, but along with your now, I understand that. See, they didn't ask me to do that. They asked you to do that because you were one of the smarter kids in the school and you can afford to be out of the classroom for a while. So it's my understanding that they teachers, administrators, took you with them, you and a few other students, to the white schools
Right.
to collect their used books to
Right.
bring back to Euclid, because the white students were getting new books.
Correct.
Okay, now let's go a step beyond that. Was there institutional racism as far as the teachers and their salaries and opportunities of upward mobility was concerned?
Ray, when Florida began funding public schools right after the Civil War, the Florida public schools were for indigent white students only.
Okay.
So black kids couldn't even begin to use the advantages and resources available to white students
Mhm.
when Florida began educating students as a public responsibility. Now let's stay with that for a moment.
Okay.
That hurt a lot of black families. White kids
It
going to
did.
school, black kids cannot go to school. The black kids went to the fields,
Mhm.
but, and there and as a matter of fact, in Broward County, they had what they called strawberry schools. Remember those?
Well, we grew up together. I remember that.
The strawberry schools were the black schools had a shorter school term,
Mhm.
so the kids could pick the strawberries and do other work in the fields. So white kids stayed in school longer than the black kids did. So all of these ways of hurt and insult and disadvantage take a toll over time.
They did.
And we saw and felt and experienced these things, as did many others of our generation.
Mhm.
And a part of my problem with what the governor is doing is he is delegitimizing our lived experiences,
Right.
as if it doesn't matter that you had these things that you went through. We're moving on. That was the past. We're moving on.
Okay. So one of the things that you're asking the governor to explain, as I understand it, is your question is uh, why can't some of this history be talked about in our public school system? It's my understanding that he thinks that children cannot handle history, our history.
Well, it's a little bit more than that.
Okay.
What the law that they passed says is that teachers
What's the
can
law? Let's talk about the Woke Act.
The Woke Act,
Okay.
among other things,
Okay.
says that teachers can't tell students things that make them feel ashamed of their race, or that makes them feel guilty
Mhm.
about transgressions of their ancestors. That's one of the major aspects of the law. Now, why is that necessary in Florida?
That's a very good
Governor
question.
Desantis cannot name, nor
That's a
can
good
any
question.
one of the other lawmakers who passed that law. They cannot name one school in Florida where students are being told to be ashamed of their race. I've challenged the governor over the last 4 days.
Mhm.
Where is this happening? That students being told that they are inherently racist? Where is it being told that students have to take the responsibility for the sins of their ancestors? This is not happening in Florida. And yet they passed this law, Republican law, to really impress white folks that they were trying to do something about what they're concerned about with African American progress and African American political challenges in Florida. So the Woke Act was not necessary. It's not the kinds of things that they're trying to prevent aren't happening to begin with. It's all an attempt to impress white voters that the Republicans are conservative and that they're pushing back against this leftist, radical, socialist challenge that the Republicans have made up. It's a false flag, right?
How many years have you spent in education as an educator?
About 46, 47 years.
46. I spent 51 as an educator.
That's right.
Now, I think our listeners could assume that we know a little something about teaching and we know a little something about how students can handle things.
Right. I was a principal of a high school, as you know.
Yeah,
So,
of course.
we know a little bit.
Well, maybe our audience does not know that you have a high school in Miami-Dade County named after you.
Yes. And if any student in that school was told that he is responsible or she is responsible for their ancestors' sins or that they are inherently racist, I take my name off the building.
Because what? Now, you're also a psychologist. So I'm
Yes.
going to ask you to go to your professional training.
All right.
I'm going to make the assumption, I honestly believe this, that our governor is an educated, intelligent man.
Yes, he is. And a former naval officer.
Okay.
He's a legal officer in the Navy.
As a psychologist, how could you explain the governor coming up with the position of exposing young children, students, to history will somehow make them feel ashamed and guilty? How can that connection honestly be?
Because there still remains in America, among many white people, a sense of guilt and shame about what happened in this country. That's understandable, but children don't need to wear that. Indeed, even adults today don't need to wear the sins of what people did 200 years ago. What people need to do, adults need to do, is to acknowledge that these things happened, acknowledge that they were real, and acknowledge that there are residual problems from it. But we don't need to bury the history just because talking about these things are going to make somebody uncomfortable.
I'm pulling from something that you wrote. You stated that there's nobody living today who owns slaves. So you're not talking about what people today did.
Absolutely not.
And
certainly not their kids.
Exactly.
So how could these politicians derive at the point of believing that kids are being threatened with this kind of assault?
Yeah, and they're going to feel some kind of guilt. They didn't do anything.
and nor do their parents for the most part. But what happens if a teacher decides to talk about the bombing of Pearl Harbor by the Japanese in 1941?
There's nothing wrong with that.
And well, hold on. And you have in Florida about I looked today about 9% of the citizens of Gainesville are Japanese Americans.
Okay.
So if you're a teacher in Gainesville or Alachua County, and you want to talk about the bombing of Pearl Harbor and the damage and the deaths and all of that came from that, and they're Japanese American students in your classroom, suppose they feel ashamed. Suppose they feel suppose they feel guilty. Is the teacher not supposed to talk about those things because those Japanese American students may feel guilty? Same thing with German Americans. Can we not talk about Hitler because German American students?
What would happen, brother, if an American student graduates high school, goes abroad, and somebody in another country asks a question about, or they are engaged in a question about Pearl Harbor, and you graduated from a 12th grade school in the United States of America, and you don't even know about that.
But we know that the education of our youth will never lack telling them what happened at Pearl Harbor.
Exactly.
The point that I'm trying to make is that the governor's law is unenforceable.
Okay.
How are teachers supposed to dole out sympathy, empathy? Which group of Americans, a subgroup of Americans, are we concerned about hurting or feeling ashamed? And to me, that seems to be basically the concern of white Americans and guilt that may be in the society based upon what some people feel might have been their own connections to it, ancestry or what have you.
Okay, well, I don't want to dominate these questions, but I do want to invite our audience, our listening audience, and viewing audience to submit questions if you like, comments if you like. We will be more than happy to respond to them live. So let's move forward.
Okay.
Okay. Do you have a question or comment that you would like to respond to?
History, I can't really read that. Can you read that?
Okay, just bring it closer. Hey, like you said, I'm right behind you. History is just that, and we should all learn the truth. So there's truth, understanding of why our society is the way it is. Do the Jews hide their past? Do the Jews hide their past? That's a good question. Do Jews hide their past? And is the governor's suggestion that they should?
One of the things that I think the German people can be proud of is that they confronted their Nazi past. They required their children to know what happened during the Second World War and to have all the kinds of defenses intellectually, emotionally, morally against this ever happening. So that is to the advantage and to the credit of the German people. I think we are way behind in terms of other countries being able to recognize that there's no country on this planet that's perfect,
exactly,
including ours. But for some reason, this belief in American exceptionalism, that we're different from every other country on the planet. And we found out on January 6th that American exceptionalism is in deep question. We were doing this, we saw people doing the same thing in our capital that we've seen happen in banana republics and other places throughout history. So we may not be all that much of an exceptional nation, given what just happened on January 6th. Now, do we get to tell kids that? Do we get to challenge that in the classroom? Are we still exceptional in terms of these other nations, or need we examine that proposition?
Okay, that was a good answer to a very good question.
Thank you, Professor.
Let me pursue your own history a little more, because see, somewhere in your history, I see where you rose above some of the racism, some of the institutional racism. So don't try to tell me I'm moving too fast. I've only got an hour. Tell me, you can put whatever institutional racist experiences you had in there, but you went to Morehouse College. You have established that, okay? And you left Morehouse College, graduated, and you were you signed up to OCS, Officers Candidate School for the United States Navy, and you were to go. Why were you going for Officers Candidate School?
You jumped over a couple of things I think we need to stay with.
Like what?
My trip to Morehouse.
But
don't we talk about that? When I almost got killed on a bus. You see, you're moving too far.
I don't want to talk about that.
All right.
Oh,
You want to
okay,
talk about? All right.
okay.
We'll deal with what you want to talk about.
All right. I understand Morehouse, but I have an hour. Our listeners can simply go to Through Black Eyes Unfiltered, and they'll find all of that.
All right.
Okay. Let's get to the naval history.
Okay.
See, because you and the governor both served in the Navy. This is all about Governor Desantis.
We were both naval officers.
Yeah, so we need some parallel here. How he rose to be a naval officer and what exceptional steps you had to go through to get there. So tell me this. You decided to enlist in the Navy as an officer.
Yes.
What happened?
Well, I had graduated from Morehouse, had a college degree, so I was qualified to apply for officer candidate school in Newport, Rhode Island. I graduated in 1961 and joined the Navy. Actually signed up in Miami, and then went with a group of 12 recruits. They were all white guys to Jacksonville to be inducted. So I took a bus from Miami to Jacksonville to be inducted into the Navy. Since I was the only one that had a college degree, they put me in charge of the group. So we get to Jacksonville around dinner time, and they call the white guys up, and they give them a ticket to go across the street to the Roosevelt Hotel, very nice hotel, to stay and come back the next morning. And then they called me up last, gave me a ticket to go across the railroad track to a whorehouse.
Where?
It was a transit whorehouse, a house of prostitution.
And this is the United States Navy.
I only spent one night in my life in a whorehouse, and the Navy paid for it. So I went across the railroad track in Jacksonville. I went to this place. I couldn't eat. There were flies and roaches in the kitchen. Women were bringing men in and out all night, so I didn't really sleep. The next morning, I couldn't face it. The kitchen was dirty. So I didn't eat or sleep very much, and went back to take the exam to go to officer candidate school the next morning, and I failed. And the petty officer, white man who was sort of processing us, called me up and said, "You're done, right?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You're the one going to officer candidate school, is that right?" I said, "Yes." He said, "No, you're not. You're going to Great Lakes with the rest of these recruits because you failed the test." And that changed my whole life at that point. Instead of becoming a naval officer, I went and became a recruit because the Navy refused to treat me in the same way that they did the white recruits. Before we left Jacksonville, I said, "Well, can I report this to somebody?" So they let me write a letter. I gave it to an officer in Jacksonville and got on the airplane with the other recruits and went to Great Lakes. And Ray, about 8 weeks later, this limousine pulls up to the barracks where I was a recruit. It was a commanding officer's car. They asked for me. The guy took me to the captain's office, and he had the letter that I'd written in Jacksonville. He said, "You complained about the situation in Jacksonville. The Navy is going to give you a chance to take the exam once more." And I did it the next day, took the exam, passed, and I went on and became an officer.
Okay, question. Let me cut you off right there because I'm drawing a parallel between you and Governor Desantis, two naval officers. Now, in your opinion, I know you don't know, but in your opinion, do you think the governor experienced anything like that as he enlisted in officers candidate school?
Well, the governor was a legal officer. I served my time on aircraft carriers as a line officer on fighting ships. But anyone who dons the uniform to protect our country, whatever his or her role is, I respect that.
Exactly.
So I respect his service, and I hope that the same is offered to me. But the Navy, at the time that I was in, was an institutionally racist organization. They had very, very few black officers, very, very few black officers on ships, to say the least. And so we were sort of used to be showpieces so that folks could see that the Navy was moving ahead with putting line officers who were black on ships. That was my difficulty with the Kennedy experience in '63 on that carrier.
You've got to mention two things here now. And number one, because you did go forth with becoming a naval officer, your younger brother Bill followed you and also became a naval officer. So
Yes.
out of the Dunn family, we had two naval officers.
And our dad was a cook. So we
Exactly.
managed to.
But how did the son of a cook get within 100 feet or so of John F. Kennedy aboard a naval ship?
Well, there's a practice in the presidency that the president of the United States gives each of the branch of services 1 day, 24 hours, and the branch decides what they want the president to do. Well, I was sent to the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk, operating off the coast of San Diego, my first duty, and President Kennedy decided to come to our ship and stay overnight. And we went through all kinds of exercise to tell you how much the Navy tried to get ready for the president's trip. They brought 3 aircraft carriers together, which rarely happens, all kinds of surface ships, submarines, and we practiced for a month. Everything went off perfectly smoothly. And I had watch on the bridge. My 4-hour watch on the bridge was when the president was going to be on the bridge. And I was excited. Everybody was excited. The president was coming. And Kennedy was late. He was in San Diego. They flew him out to the ship, but he was spending time with the enlisted men in San Diego and was late getting to the ship. So my watch was over, as the watch for the other 3 officers who were on with me. And the other officers went up and asked the captain for permission to leave the ship. Permission was granted. And Ray, when I went up and asked permission to leave the bridge, the captain said no.
No, why do you think he said that?
Because they wanted me on the bridge when Kennedy was on the bridge. I was not allowed to go below. And this doesn't happen unless a ship is being fought, unless you're being attacked. When your time is up on the bridge, the captain lets you go. And the thing about that, Raymond, was that everybody knew that I was being treated differently, that I was being kept on the bridge when that just didn't happen.
And again, we're talking about signs of institutional racism.
Yes.
Okay, because I'm trying to build this whole list of experiences that include examples of institutional racism to try and understand why the governor will not answer the questions, which I'm going to actually list at the end of this chat, why he will not answer the Dunn questions when you've gone through all of these different types of institutional racist experiences.
Well, Raymond, I know how the governor has not responded. These are very difficult questions for him to answer. I mean, he cannot identify a single school in Florida where white children are being told to be ashamed of their race. He cannot identify a single school in Florida where any child is being told that he or she is responsible for the sins of their ancestors. It's a political trick, I think, really, to get conservative white voters to flock to the Republican Party because they're afraid of these, as I think the governor would put it, progressive, radical left-wingers, indoctrinating, as they put it, indoctrinating our kids. So a lot of the animus comes from this, I think, mean plan, because it's not sensible. It's a mean-spirited plan to trick the public into thinking that there's a problem that does not really exist.
Okay, let me share with you a couple of comments that have come in while you were chatting. Feel free to answer some of them, please. Valone 1, politicians like DeSantis don't believe the nonsense they are promulgating. It's a cynical strategy to maintain power by appealing to their know-nothing base and demonstrates no integrity. Comment?
Well, these people, Ray, are following Trump. DeSantis is following the Trump playbook. Trump had no integrity. That is as plain as anything could possibly be. But his appeal to racism worked.
So the governor is following.
He is following the Trump playbook. Make the white folks afraid of the black people. make the parents afraid of the teachers, make everybody afraid of the leftist, progressive, socialists who are trying to take over our guns. It's all based on fear.
Okay.
And it worked.
Okay. I have to cut you there. I need to get some answers to different
All right.
people writing in. Okay. Answer, Mrs. Lauren. I worked in day schools for 38 years and never saw a teacher tell students how to feel about our country's dark past. Why do we need a law?
We don't need the law. Desantis needs the law to get to the White House. That's what this is all about.
Oh,
and a lot of the Republicans need that law to get back to their House seats or to the Senate. This is a political false flag that's working pretty well. And they're doing it, as I said a moment ago, because it worked for Trump. Scare the white folks, and you could get to be president.
Answer Rakeem Adams, who states the South is slowly rising again. Do you see that?
Well, he's wrong. The South has.
How such?
Because the South has already risen.
Okay.
Southern politicians have a disproportionate amount of influence in politics. That's been the case since the Republic was established. Hasn't changed since then. So a person who espouses conservative Southern political philosophy has a good chance of being elected to an office in the former Confederate States. And so we see this being the playbook for so many Southern politicians, white politicians, especially in the South, where race is such a sensitive issue.
Let me ask you to respond to some of the questions that you're asking Governor DeSantis. Now, you can't answer for him, but you can tell us a little bit about why you're asking that question.
Okay.
You asked Governor DeSantis, when I was a little boy growing up in Florida, I had to drink from the colored fountain at Volusia County Courthouse. The white water was cool, but ours was warm. This made me feel bad. May I share this with students?
I wish I could.
Do you feel that the government is stopping you and other teachers from sharing that information?
Yes.
Is that what this is all about?
The governor and these Republicans are delegitimizing my lived experience as being relevant to the lives and learning of children in Florida schools. And that simply isn't true.
You asked.
It should not be true.
I hate to cut you off, but we have a limited amount of time. You asked Governor DeSantis, when in 1966, the University of Florida refused to admit me to its graduate school because of my race. I was a naval officer overseas on an aircraft carrier serving my country. I cried. Should students know how much racism can hurt? What do you want him to say? What do you want him to do?
I want the governor to recognize that racism hurts, that there is still a generation of Americans who love our country, who have these painful experiences, and we think that they're relevant to life today and to our children. Because I believe, I can't speak for other people, I believe that those experiences should be taught to our children, not to make anybody feel guilty or ashamed, but because kids need to appreciate that racism hurts.
Is this an example of what you just said? You asked Governor DeSantis. Governor DeSantis, in 1832, the Florida Territory enacted a law prohibiting Negroes to congregate for any purpose except for work or attend divine worship. Was this an example of racism in Florida law? And may I share this history with my students?
When Florida became a state, 1845, I believe it was, and Spanish left, there was a sense that things were too loose in Florida. The Spanish had been here. You had these mixed Negroes. You had these Spanish laws that allowed slaves to have rights. So there was a sense when Florida became a state, you got to clamp down.
Okay.
Particularly on free blacks. So the legislature, one of the first acts the Florida legislature passed was that all free blacks had to leave Florida or be re-enslaved. And once you left Florida, if you were a free black person, you couldn't come back. Except at the threat of possibly being re-enslaved. Now, if that's not institutionalized racism at the state level, I don't know what is. One of many, many laws. You couldn't serve on a jury. You couldn't own property.
You have too much information. respond to this
Sure.
question.
There's no such thing as too much
No,
information.
no, but I have limited time, so
Right.
bear with me. React to this question that you're asking Governor DeSantis that he has not answered. Governor DeSantis, between 1930 and 1972, 455 people were executed in America for rape. 89% of them were black. 97.3% of the execution took place in former Confederate states. Is this institutional racism, sir? Would you like to push him a little bit on that?
He can't answer that question except to say yes. Race played a factor, or was a factor, in the implementation of the death penalty in Florida for rape, and that black men were held accountable, their lives taken for allegedly raping white women. I don't know that any black man was ever executed for raping a black woman, incidentally. If that's not racist, I don't know what it is. But I think it was into the 1980s before the first white man in Florida was executed for raping a black woman.
Okay, all right, cut. Do you think, as an educated man, that Governor DeSantis is aware of this question that you wrote? Governor DeSantis, about 1,400 black men from Florida fought for the Union. Some Confederate commanders ordered the execution of black soldiers who were captured, but spared white Union captives. White privilege? Should students know this?
When Lincoln agreed to arm blacks, give them guns to kill white men, the South was outraged that black men were being given guns to kill white men. And so that was a sense, not among all of them, but among some of the Confederate commanders, that this was an insult. And that any black man who had the temerity to pick up a gun to kill a white man doesn't deserve to live. So yes, it was white privilege. It was yet another example of the way in which, in this case, black soldiers were treated much more harshly than were white soldiers.
Okay, I'm trying to pick out some of your Dunn questions that I think that the governor should know. And you tell
me. Got a lot
of
questions on the board there too.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. I'm going to pick up some of those. Let me ask a couple more of the Dunn questions.
Okay.
Governor DeSantis, between 1948 and 1956, 85 black students were denied admission to the University of Florida. It remained all white until the 1950s. Was this white privilege, institutional racism? May I share this with the students?
The University of Florida really did not want black people on that campus. When Virgil Hawkins, the first black man who eventually challenged the racist law that black people could not be admitted to the University of Florida Law School, the university lost in federal court. Right. But rather than admitting this black man to the UF Law School, the University of Florida, the state of Florida, built a law school on the black university, on FAMU campus, just to keep black students from being able to go to UF. Now, a lot of that was based upon the whole separate but equal thing, where because the state had to provide separate but equal facilities for blacks as well as whites, if a black person wanted to go to the law school at Gainesville and that person was going to be denied, the state had to offer separate but equal accommodations someplace else. And that's why they built the black law school at FAMU.
Okay, I know about that because I graduated FAMU.
You did more than that. You participated in the civil rights demonstration in Tallahassee. You have your own record of activism. You just be looking at me.
11 days in Tallahassee jail.
That's another program. We've done that.
No, we're talking about DeSantis. Let me ask you to respond to a couple more comments coming in from our listening public. Let's go to this one from Craft Explorer. Well, actually, Craft Explorer is agreeing with Lauren. In Judaism, because we talked about this, in Judaism, we believe that the horrors of the past must never be forgotten, lest they be repeated. And then Craft Explorer is saying, that's my point.
Yeah, the state of Florida requires schools to cover the Holocaust. And that's a good thing. State law requires that the Holocaust be covered. My question is, well, won't that make some students feel uncomfortable or even ashamed? So are teachers supposed to just skip over the Holocaust? Or are we okay to have kids feel sad about the Holocaust, but not about slavery? I mean, what kinds of things can kids feel sad about and not have the teacher be in trouble?
Respond to Rakeem Adams, please. Mr. Adams says white supremacy is on the rise in Florida and that Black people in Florida are in a state of emergency. Do you see that?
Yes. Yes. I think Mr. Trump showed us that. And I've traveled to all parts of Florida, including North Florida. I've seen the signs. I've seen the evidence that our state is a divided state, and that a significant portion of our population north of Palm Beach County is very, very conservative, not necessarily racist, but very, very conservative, politically speaking. And that makes them inclined to fall for this crap that Desantis is putting out, that kids are being told that they have to be ashamed of their parents.
Let's go back to a couple more of your questions to the governor.
All right.
Governor DeSantis, until the 1940s, Blacks could not join the Democratic Party at a time when Democrats ruled the South. Is this an example of white privilege and institutional racism? May I share this with my students?
Well, our parents were Republicans.
I know.
Mom and dad were, because before 1946 or 1947, a Black person in the South could not join the Democratic Party. Someone may say, well, so what? The so what was that the Democratic Party controlled the South. The Republicans were totally irrelevant politically. So if you couldn't join the Democratic Party, you might as well not vote. It took a federal court in Texas, All Right versus Texas, to force the Democratic Party to admit Black people. And once they did that in mid-1940s, Blacks in the South became politically powerful, potent, able to begin electing Black officials and passing laws and what have you that were in their best interest. So, but the Democratic Party was racist until forced to admit Blacks, I think in 1947, when that case was decided in Texas.
Now, I don't want to lay all the blame of institutional racism on the governor.
Oh, let's not.
Oh, okay.
I don't either.
Oh, okay. So
I just blame him for not responding. It's not his fault.
I got your point. So, but I do wonder whether or not the governor and his staff have looked at some of these Dunn questions. Let me share for people who are not aware of the Dunn questions. There are about 25, 27 of the Dunn questions that we are hoping that the governor will respond to. And most of them have to do with institutional racism. And he's in a position now to do something about that. So we go back giving examples of the past and of the present, hoping that the governor will say, ooh, maybe I missed something and do something about it.
No, bro. No. What people like the governor do is they say that's past. That's history. We passed civil rights bills. We desegregated schools. We passed affirmative action. What do you people want? What more do you want? You're equal. Some white folks believe that Black people have even more advantages today than they do. So white America is in no position to accommodate Black complaints about discrimination. A lot of white folks feel that they're the ones who are being discriminated against right
now. Let's look at a comment from Susan Laguardia.
Go for it.
Has DeSantis observed himself CRT in classrooms? I doubt he spent any time in a school since he's been in office. He has not consulted with educators upon his decision. He is encouraging racism. What do you have to say to Susan LaGuardia?
LaGuardia makes a very good point. If you were a textbook publisher right now, with now these questions being raised about whether or not a chart in a math book that has some relevance or indirect relevance to race now makes the book unusable. What DeSantis and others around the country are doing is they are suppressing the information that goes into textbooks, because publishers are going to be concerned that school districts will not buy their books if, in fact, there's a good chance that some parent is going to make a complaint that there's a comment or a chart or something in that book that they're selling that's going to be offensive.
Mhm.
So I'm glad that she asked that question, because it goes beyond just what the governor's doing. It goes to particularly the folks who are producing the documents, the content
Mhm.
that our kids use to learn and that our teachers use to teach them. They're going to be much more cautious about what goes in those books. And it's unnecessary caution, because they end up leaving out important information that our students should be exposed to.
Speak, if you will, specifically to the points of the woke law. Uh, the governor is threatening, in my opinion, threatening any teacher who dare teach uh, uh, the history of slavery, the history.
Not exactly. No,
the
no,
KKK.
no.
Okay,
They
so
say,
yeah.
no, they're saying you can teach the history. You can't tell students to feel bad. Isn't that stupid?
But how
you can teach about slavery, but you can't tell white students that they are responsible for what happened during slavery.
But nobody's going to tell a young white student in fourth grade that they're responsible for what
tell
happened in slavery.
DeSantis that. Tell Ron that. Tell the rest of those Republicans who are.
That's ridiculous to come
It
up
is
with
ridiculous.
stuff like that.
I don't know a single teacher, 40 years of being involved in public education, who would tell a student, you're responsible for what your granddaddy did. Or you should feel bad because you're white or black. It is a false flag. It's not happening, but it's getting these people elected to office. And may work for DeSantis.
And in your opinion, I'm going back to something that you just said. You think that Governor DeSantis is pushing these kinds of things simply because they are Trump kinds of decisions,
Let me put it.
and he wants his connection to Trump's base.
Governor DeSantis is playing by the Trump playbook because it worked. And it's working again for the governor. It works particularly when he bullies people, including teachers, educators, to do what he wants. So what we're finding out is that for at least the first time in my lived experience, America has moved, because of Trump, and now Trump supporters like DeSantis, America has moved from debating issues, as we have always done, to now there's hatred and anger. That has seeped into the body politic. Since when do Americans get angry with each other? We can disagree. We can end up settling at the ballot box. But now, because of Trump, we're being poisoned with anti-black feelings, anti-immigrant feelings, anti-white. It's just all over the place. And I think, bad feelings beget bad feelings. If you got racist whites doing some of the things we saw happen over the last several months, it's going to bring out the other side. It's going to bring out black folks who have nothing but ill intentions. So evil begets evil, bad begets bad. And that's where we are now, where the fringes on the left and the right are now dominating politics. And you get someone like DeSantis who's able to finagle the system so that he might use race to get to the White House.
Okay, let me go back to you specifically. How many books have you published?
4.
Name the titles for me.
Is this a quiz?
Yes.
The Minor Right of 1980, Crossing the Bounds. Minor Right of 1980, Crossing the Bounds. Black Miami in the 20th Century. A History of Florida Through Black Eyes. And I just finished a novel called The Kingsleys.
Question.
I did a book called The Beast in Florida too.
Yes,
that book's out of print. So 5 books.
Question. Has any of your books, to your knowledge, been banned under these actions that Governor DeSantis is taking?
No.
uh, what will make, on what basis is Governor DeSantis um, banning books that students cannot
I,
read?
I think, Ray, that what happens is if a single student goes home, complains to his or her parent that they were made to feel bad because of something the teacher said to them in the classroom or something they saw in a textbook, that parent goes to the school the next day, confronts the principal, and then what happens? The book gets banned, the teacher might get fired. One student, one parent complaining about what was said in the classroom, which might well be misquoted to begin with. What DeSantis and these other folks are doing is empowering parents who have, I think, uh, illegitimate basis to try to affect curriculum changes and textbook changes in the school to be able to do so based upon a single complaint.
Mm-hmm.
It goes one or two people, and that's disproportionate. It's not that parents should not have influence over what's in the schools, but why should one or two parents complaining about a book be able to get that book banned from the system? You got another 30 other kids in that class whose parents have not complained about the book. So it is giving a disproportionate amount of influence to people who can make complaints and get them through the system without there being a realistic reason for it.
If you've served as a principal of a school,
Yes.
What is your answer to that? How if a book shows up in your school's library and parents complain, how would you, forget about the law right now, that's over your head, how would you as a principal handle that?
I would sit down with the parent and the student. I would have the parent and the student tell me what the objectionable part of the lesson or book is. I would dismiss the student, and then I would discuss it with the parent. I would ask him or her or them what their problem is with this particular passage or this particular book. If they were able to show me, convince me that there was something in that book that was untrue, that was not correct in terms of the content, I would say, well, I appreciate your complaint, but we're not going to make a change in this curriculum or in this course because of the complaint of a single student. On the other hand, if they showed me something that really did reflect badly on the teaching process, then of course I would ask that be amended. Parents have a right to come in, of course, all the years that I was a principal, and express their concerns, and we are obliged to respond to them, but we're not commanded to.
Exactly. Let me quote just a couple more of your questions to Governor DeSantis that he has not responded to. Governor DeSantis.
All of these folks, have got questions.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to keep up with their questions.
Go ahead.
You.
All right.
Let's have this one out there. Governor DeSantis and the U.S. in 1862 United Homestead Act gave acres to white settlers out west, land that has been previously settled by Native Americans, but not to blacks. Is this an example of racism?
Yes. As a matter of fact, in this case, it was the Native Americans who took it. What do you think the white folks who now live in Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, the Carolinas, where do you think how did they get that land?
That's a good question.
There were people living on those lands before the white folks came, and the white people wanted the lands. So the government passed laws that made these people move forcibly from their lands, and it was made available to white men, not to black people, not to white women, but to white men. So listen, the land that is now, those states I just named, was virtually given to white men for free. What you had to do was to work the land. Get slaves or workers or yourself or your family and produce something on that land, and then it's yours. But black men were not given that privilege, Governor. And when it comes to the most serious privilege that blacks were denied, it was the privilege of land ownership.
because that would establish wealth.
That's the way wealth is. That's the way wealth is passed down in our society. And if you have a practice or a rule or a law that says black folks are out when it comes down to giving out land, we are institutionally punished by the government, and that's what happened in terms of the land distribution from that 1862 Act.
I have a comment from one of our listeners. He states, "It's a shame we didn't have the easy recording ability we have today 50 years ago. We could have videos of your first psychology of racism class at FIU available on the internet for all to see."
Well,
what class is he talking about?
Well, some of my students may not want to see that class again.
Okay, just tell us for a minute what class is he talking
I taught a class called The Psychology of Racism 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a well-attended class, and the purpose was to help my students, these are now college students, university students, understand how racism evolved in our society and how to contend with it.
Okay, and this student remembered that and would like to wish that you had the ability to pull that up so that it could be shared with others. But, when we said that we would do this live for an hour, I knew that I would have a problem with it because you got so much history there, personal and otherwise, on racism, institutional racism, the governor's not responding appropriately to certain things that affect minorities. But I would really like to ask you to just close with your own personal comment or one or two last questions to the governor, because our time is up now. So if Governor Desantis or members of his staff are listening to this show right now, what would you like for him to do, or what would you ask his staff to do?
Stop lying to the public just to get to the White House. Stop making up a problem that we don't have just to scare people to get votes. It's despicable. It's beneath you. If you're going to be president, of this country, this is a very low down, cheap way to go about doing it. Just because Trump did it and won, there's no reason for you to be doing it, Governor. Answer my questions. Is there institutional racism in Florida? Is there institutional racism in our country? And what should be done about it if, in fact, we agree that it does exist?
Brother, I hope that our listeners have appreciated this this program, and I would like to close this.
Well, let me also mention DunnHistory.com.
Okay.
Because a lot of the things we're talking about are on my website, DunnHistory.com. My legacy, these stories that we're talking about, films, all of that is on that website, DunnHistory.com.
You can also find it on Through Black Eyes Unfiltered .com.
So, one of the things that we're gifted with is the kind of resources to get information out to the public that we didn't have 20 years ago. So even though there may be those who are trying to block what you can learn in the classroom or blot out what is taught in classrooms, you have the internet. You have these kinds of programs that can get you information directly without having to go through anybody, Governor DeSantis or anybody else.
Okay, we're winding down at the last minute. Would you like to say just 30 seconds about your latest venture that you're doing?
Which one?
The program that you're doing with Miami Heat.
Well, no. What we're planning, the Miami Heat's been very helpful in supporting the new nonprofit, the Miami Center for Racial Justice, that I've started. And we're doing some planning to do some very exciting things with young people from Liberty City this coming January. But I can't make an announcement this early because it might cause some difficulties where we're going to go.
Okay.
Don't want to put them on alert.
Look, I'm sorry I pushed you on that, but
it's all right.
I want to get it all out there.
It's okay.
Okay, we appreciate all who listened to us. We invite you to follow us on Through Black Eyes Unfiltered.com. We ask you to join us on DunnHistory.com. Brett, thank you very much.
Right, okay.
It was very interesting.
Right.
Good night.
And thank you, Ray Jr., for the technical assistance and support. My nephew.
There we go.
All right. Well,
Yeah.